Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we're doing something really cool. We're bridging ancient wisdom and modern science to uncover the profound difference between just knowing about life and actually experiencing it. We're going to be exploring Chapter 7 of the Bhagavad Gita, but look, we're not just treating this as some dusty old philosophical text. No, we're putting it right under the microscope of modern physics and psychology. Let's see how its ancient insights into material knowledge versus actual realization hold up against what we literally know about the universe today.
So are you just collecting facts, or are you actually experiencing life? I mean, it perfectly captures our modern dilemma, doesn't it? Think about it. We've got access to more data, more logic, and more scientific breakthroughs right in our pockets than any generation before us. We can instantly pull up the entire history of the world, learn a new language on our commute, or watch a rocket land itself. Yet, despite this absolute wealth of information, feelings of anxiety and disconnection, they're at all-time highs. So why is that? Why doesn't having all the answers actually make us feel whole? Well, the answer lies in the massive gap between what our minds can categorize and what our consciousness actually feels.
Here's a quick roadmap for today's explainer. We're starting with the information age dilemma, then we'll contrast Jnana versus Vijnana. From there, we're going to dive into the physics of spirituality, explore the universal string, and wrap it all up with living the realization.
All right, Section 1, the information age dilemma. Let's really look at this gap between our brains and our hearts.
Look, we live in an era completely saturated with material data. Now, just to be clear, this material knowledge is incredibly important. It builds our bridges, it powers the internet, it cures diseases. But we rely on it so heavily that we've kind of confused it with actual wisdom. Think about it like this. We can understand the exact chemical composition of a teardrop, right? The water, the oils, the enzymes. But that raw scientific data tells us absolutely zero about the subjective experience of deep human sorrow or tears of overwhelming joy. We can doom scroll through literally thousands of connection points on social media, yet still feel utterly alone in a crowded room. Material knowledge absolutely helps our society function, but it's supreme knowledge, actual realization, that gives our lives meaning. Basically, we're starving for meaning in an endless sea of facts.
Moving on to Section 2, Jnana versus Vijnana. This brings us to a really fundamental distinction made thousands of years ago in the Gita.
Okay, think about the difference between reading a restaurant menu and actually tasting the meal. Jnana is the menu. It's intellectual understanding, the concepts you can study, categorize, or explain to a friend over coffee. Like reading a peer-reviewed study that proves meditation lowers cortisol levels. That is entirely jhana. But Vijna, that is the meal itself. It's the experiential realization. Vijna is sitting down, closing your eyes, and actually feeling that incredible calm wash over your nervous system. You aren't just thinking about peace anymore, you're experiencing it. And Chapter 7 of the Bhagavad Gita is totally devoted to bridging this exact gap between head knowledge and heart experience.
So the Gita breaks this down into a really clear hierarchy of understanding. At the very base, you've got material knowledge. This is your everyday functioning knowledge, coding, physics, languages, knowing how to fix a car. Right above that is intellectual spiritual knowledge. This is debating ethics, discussing philosophy, or understanding the rules of a religion. But notice something here. Both of those lower tiers are still just theoretical. The absolute pinnacle is the third tier, supreme knowledge, or Vijnana. This isn't something you just read about. It is a direct, lived experience that completely alters your perception of yourself and your connection to the universe. It's the ultimate inner transformation.
Which brings us to Section 3, the physics of spirituality. To really grasp this without just taking it on blind faith, let's look at how modern science actually validates these ancient ideas. Okay, this parallel absolutely blew my mind. According to research, including studies in the International Journal of Sanskrit Research, the hard laws of thermodynamics perfectly mirror the spiritual concepts of the Gita. The first law of thermodynamics states that energy cannot be created or destroyed, right? It can only be transformed. Well, this is the exact same principle as the Gita's concept of the indestructible soul. The unique energy animating you right now, it doesn't just vanish, it just changes form. And the second law of thermodynamics, which deals with entropy and how energy disperses and changes in a system over time, that directly parallels the soul's continuous evolution through different lifetimes. It's literally treating consciousness as a fundamental, evolving energy system. How wild is that?
Just notice how the scientific principle of entropy increasing in a closed system maps so perfectly to this ancient wisdom. In a thermodynamic system, energy moves and creates increasing complexity and transformation. While similarly, the soul,
at least according to the Gita, journeys through continuous cycles, evolving toward a higher, more complex understanding of the universe. You aren't just a static body acting out a single script. You are an ongoing, massive energy transformation cycle.
And you know, in physics, systems naturally strive for a balanced, stable state known as equilibrium. When things get too hot, they try to cool down and balance out. Well, in Vijnana, managing your internal state through mindfulness serves the exact same function. Think of it like building a mental thermos. A thermos is this highly efficient, perfectly balanced energy system that protects what's inside, totally insulating it from the chaotic temperatures outside, right? Experiential realization allows you to maintain your emotional equilibrium, basically keeping your inner peace perfectly intact, regardless of all the swirling chaos of the external world.
All right, Section 4, the universal string. So, if energy is conserved and transformed, what actually holds it all together?
The Gita uses this incredibly beautiful analogy here. When you look at a pearl necklace, your eyes naturally focus on the individual pearls, right? But what makes it a necklace is the invisible string holding it all together. The Gita is telling us that despite the illusion of our separate bodies, our separate lives, and our seemingly separate problems, there is an underlying, unified energy stringing us all together. This is crazy, because thousands of years before Albert Einstein famously called it spooky action at a distance, the Gita was essentially describing quantum entanglement. In modern physics, entanglement completely defied classical rules because it proved that seemingly isolated particles are actually part of a single unified whole. If you affect one entangled particle, you instantly affect the other, no matter how far apart they are. Vijnana is simply the experiential equivalent of quantum entanglement. The universe isn't some box full of separate random objects crashing into each other. It's a unified, breathing, interconnected web.
Now, when you truly experience this, and I may not just memorize it as data, but actually feel it as Vijnana, the terrifying illusion of isolation completely disappears. Think about the impact of that for a second. If you deeply realize that you and the people around you are tethered by the exact same universal string, how could you possibly harm someone else? Harming another person would quite literally be like your left hand attacking your right hand. You finally realize that you aren't just a random fragment of chaos, you are a living, breathing manifestation of a deeply connected reality.
Section 5. Living the realization. So, the big question, how do we actually take this out of the realm of high-level physics and philosophy and bring it into our daily lives?
Well, yoga provides a highly practical ladder to help us climb from basic stress relief all the way to that ultimate realization. First, you might just do some breathing exercises simply to stop feeling anxious or restless. Makes sense. Then, as you progress, you start to notice you're less reactive to things, like a stressful email or getting cut off in traffic. You attain that thermodynamic equanimity we talked about earlier. Third, your actions become naturally skillful. You cause far less friction in your relationships and your work. And finally, you reach supreme knowledge, where you're just fully immersed in that connected, universal consciousness.
The absolute beauty of this is that experiencing this deep interconnectedness naturally dissolves the ego and our deepest fears. When you shift your life from Jnana to Vijnana, you don't just act calm, you are calm. You don't have to force yourself to be kind or to bite your tongue, because you naturally see the unity in everything around you. You remain steady through both life's extreme pleasures and its severe pains, because you finally understand the continuous energy transformations of life. It literally replaces insecurity with profound psychological maturity.
So I leave you with this final thought. We spend so much of our modern lives rapidly collecting data, debating endless philosophies, and carefully reading the menu of life. And yeah, material knowledge will certainly help you function, pay your bills, and build your life. But if you truly want meaning, if you want to dissolve that feeling of isolation, it's time to step out of the realm of mere intellectual facts. It's time to stop reading and finally taste the meal. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Until next time, stay curious and keep experiencing.